Good morning and welcome to Exploring Glorantha. I am JM, and as always is with me my eternally reincarnated and brought back from the dead, Evan Goldtooth. Evan, welcome to. I figured we did Prax last week. We got to have
Yeah,
some Praxian or Pavisian uh, callbacks in the show. What would the show be without callbacks to previous episodes?
that's right.
How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. Hi, everybody.
Now, we're actually recording this episode early because at the time that it airs, Evan will actually be at an undisclosed location with myself, and we will be playing a ton of D&D. Yes, I know, it's the Exploring Glorantha show, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So, today we're continuing our Air Rune spiral around Dragon Pass. We started in Sartar, we moved up and around Atarsh, we went out to the east and hit Prax and Pavis in the Big Rubble, and now we're taking a massive swing down, back around, and we're hitting Esrolia, the land of 10,000 goddesses. I almost said holy country. It's like, wait, no, that's Evan would be very disappointed if I pivoted into Holy Country. So this is where this is one of the starting cultures in RuneQuest Glorantha that you can play. It is one of the cultures you can play in 13th Age Glorantha, and obviously in Quest Worlds or Hero Quest, you're going to be able to do essentially whatever you want with it. So this is if Sartar is the center, if you will, of uh, Orlanth as the primary deity of the pantheon. Esrolia is sort of unique in all of the other kingdoms that we've talked about in the fact that it is predominantly Ernalda and other earth goddesses as the primaries of the cults that are worshipped in this land. In fact, it's called the land of 10,000 goddesses, and that should give you kind of clue you into the difference between Esrolian culture and Orlanthi culture. So Evan has pointed out in our notes, which if you are a member of our patrons, that you get in advance or after, or sometime JD produces to you at some point. The Godlearners just did a whole episode on the Earth worship, and Jeff Richards did a video on the general homelands, including Esrolia, on the Chaosium YouTube channel. Speaking of YouTube and social media, see how I, right? Talking Isri's initiate, we had a contest that ran from the middle of September until today. And at the end of this episode, you will get to find out who won this contest, and that person will be getting a Rubble Redux PDF packet from the very generous guys over there and who have partnered with us to kind of do this giveaway. So tune in at the end of the episode. Evan, don't let me forget that. I've got it written down, but I haven't had a lot of coffee as of this point, so who knows where we will be. So, Esrolia. Evan, let's start into Esrolia. What is Esrolia? What has Jeff said about Esrolia? What has Greg said about Esrolia? What do we need to know about it to kind of set our baseline?
Absolutely. Well, sort of the text on Esrolia is Greg's land, Esrolia, land of 10,000 goddesses. But it was a work in progress, and so things have been refined since then. And there's more official word, obviously, in the Guide to Glorantha, the Glorantha source book, the RuneQuest, Role-Playing in Glorantha, and the starter set. All of those things have lots of information about Esrolia, and we can look forward to more because eventually Chaosium is going to get us to the great city of Notchet, in which is the greatest city in the world, 100,000 population. It is the great port city, and it is the gateway to the rest of Glorantha in Chaosium's planned publication, master layout. We're not getting there for a while, so let's sit back and find out more about Esrolia. So Esrolia is one of the 6 countries that used to make up the Holy Country. In the present timeline, the Holy Country is coming apart because what held it together was its ruler for 3 centuries, a reincarnating demigod named Belantar, known as the God King. But the Lunars got him. And so now each part of the Holy Country is starting to find its own way. Esrolia is an ancient land, and one exceptionally favored by the Earth goddesses. It is the birthplace of Bernalda, Esrola, and therefore has a profound depth of connection to the Earth, the Earth rune, and the Earth deities, and also a history that is unbroken. That people can count their genealogy back into the god time, and even though it's suffered a lot, of course, we describe Glorantha as sort of in some ways, the god time was paradise, and then this is just a post-apocalyptic, period of recovery. But Esrolia recovered pretty well. It did not lose its connection back into the god time. It's no bigger than Sartar, really a little bit smaller, but it has 10 times Sartar's population.
Right. It is one of the most densely populated regions in all of Glorantha, especially in the Dragon Pass area.
Absolutely. And because it's favored by the Earth, it has 80% of its population are rural agriculturalists in exceptionally fertile valleys along rivers, but unlike the vast majority of Glorantha, it's also exceptionally urban in that 20% of its nearly 2 million population live in cities. It is a place of sophistication, of culture, of exceptional wealth. And so it is a contrast, because it has a heavily stratified society, but one where the bottom is still much wealthier than those around it, and the people at the top have access to exceptional opportunities, exceptional wealth, exceptional luxury items, and it has these profoundly wealthy and well-provisioned temples. It has perhaps the greatest library in the world, one of the oldest and largest earth temples in the world. It has the greatest Chalana Arroy hospital in the world.
I was just going to bring that up. So there's a lot of analogs here in my mind that are pinging off things like Sumer, Old Kingdom Egypt. But one of the key differences in Glorantha that you need to remember is, yes, violence is rampant, but it's not quite the same as the Bronze Age in our world, in the fact that because of the access to priestesses of the earth, especially Chalana Arroy, many of the things that our early cities suffered from and our early civilizations suffered from, there's a change there. They don't have the same, let's call it, mortality rate, because of the presence of the earth goddesses and the healing magic of Chalana Arroy. So they can support this massive 40,000. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot to us, but again, 40,000, right? 20% of 2 million?
No, we're talking
400,000.
We're talking
400,000 urban
with 100,000 just in Notchet alone.
Just in Notchet, yeah. Shouldn't try to do math before my first cup of coffee.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, you can put your comments in the comment section. Right. So the other very exceptional feature of Esrolian society is that because of how things developed in the gods' time, women had to step up to lead the survival of the people. The balance between the divine masculine and divine feminine went out of balance because Glorantha left on the Lightbringer quest. He left his descendants, the Venkatlings. Venkat was his son, a divine king of Orlanthe in the Dragon Pass area, but his descendants were not perfect. They leaned very much into violence is always an option, and in fact tore themselves apart and weakened themselves so much that then when chaos showed up, that the royal house of the Venkatlings was annihilated. And the land was devastated. And so the grandmothers of Esrolia had to pull the pieces together, and they helped pull together a divine entity named Imarja, a goose goddess, but one that embodied the divine feminine. And this goose goddess led them to the deity of queenship, of sovereignty with a connection to the divine feminine. And the grandmothers reorganized society. They saved their civilization, their population, and they held out and reorganized society. They found allies and support. They made deals with darkness embodied by Arganagar's son Ezkankeko, the only old one who we've met. Yes. He is important on the Lightbringer quest and many other things. And he had power to help protect them. So the structure of society is that it is stratified. There are noble families known as enfranchised families. They call the shots. Then there are client families below that, and they do much more of the work. The enfranchised families are led by grandmothers. The grandmother of an enfranchised family is the absolute ruler of that family. Men have no political power. Men are very useful and important for certain things. The survival of the family, you need the balance between men and women, but men in Esrolian society are considered very poor decision makers. It is women, and of course older women, grandmothers, those who have shown that they have created the next generation and then lived to guide the next generation. You're a grandmother, you have power within your own family, and you are then obedient only to the sort of next level of grandmother in terms of rank. So within the family, absolute authority to the grandmother. But in wider society, everything has to be decided by consensus. There is a grand council of the 200 enfranchised families, and they make all of the decisions. And it is not majority rule. It is rule by consensus, which means a lot of talking, a lot of deal making, a lot of compromise, and of course, some pretty nasty intrigue behind the scenes. If you've got somebody who just won't move, maybe something happens to that person. That's not, that's not part of the ideals of society, but that's part of the reality of society.
Yes. So you have this matriarchal society, and what's interesting is And I believe we see this both in the 13th Age Glorantha rulebook and in the RuneQuest rulebook. There are, what do the cultures see themselves as? What does everyone else kind of see themselves as?
Exactly.
And the Esrolians, kind of the quintessential image of Esrolian priestess for me, is that um, is the Ernalda, or the Earth Priestess, with a uh, snakes around her arms and neck, typically bare chested, partially climate based, partially just culturally based. But the Esrolians seem to think of themselves as among the most civilized, curious, luxurious, and sensual people. They set their styles, and their culture set the styles for all of the lands around them. Now, the thing is, they are also, as Evan said, they are much more talkers. They are much more interested in the discussion. So from the outside, it can look like very things move very slowly, and that they are, especially compared to Sartorites, they are very slow to rally themselves to war. But again, what's interesting is you again see two cultures foundationally built upon the gods that they worship. And this is key to Glorantha. To know the people, you have to know the gods. The culture is spun out of these two forces, the people and the gods that they worship. So Orlanthi, we get this very, Star Trek, we get this very warlike, quarrelsome, honor-bound society that, you have all of these rings that you have to make sure you know where you're standing in relationship to the Tula, to the clan, to the tribe, to the kingdom. In Esrolia, we have a much more deliberative, much more talk first, violence as the last resort. Now, this caused other people to see them as very proud, ambitious, devious, emotional, quarrelsome. Um, at least in my group, when they went to an Earth temple during a feast on Earth Day, they found them to be, what's the word that I can use here that won't get us pinged uh, on YouTube? Very licentious,
Hmm.
right? And part of that comes from the fact that the Earth goddesses are about fecundity, the renewal of life, the enjoyment of life, and the procreation of the next generation. So if you come from a different culture and you are seeing their festivals, their rites, it can seem very Woodstocky. Woodstock has nothing on Esrolia. Um,
Burning Man.
Burning Man, there we go. That's an even better one. So again, we're seeing a completely different culture. And what's interesting to me is that in a time in gaming where some of these issues have become very much hot topic buttons to press, Greg and the guys at Chaosium were producing material for an entirely matriarchal society built from the ground up with a very clear, this does not feel like a, as you said, kind of a divine masculine based society with the serial numbers filed off and a fresh coat of um, women in charge. This is from the ground up a culture that, again, goes back to that spinning wheel of who are the people who worship the goddess? What are the goddess's ideals? And from that, just kind of the whole tapestry of Esrolia was spun out. It's a fascinating land to go visit. Now, speaking of the land, as we said, it's sort of the northwestern portion of Holy Country. Kind of you come down from Sartar heading toward the west. And one of the things I like about it is because it's such a, I'm gonna use fecund. I think I'm gonna use fecund a lot in this episode. Uh, my goal is to break someone's dictionary today. Uh, a lot of the things that are on the outskirts of Sartar are very much neighborly, if you will, in Esrolia. Dryads, right? Elves. These are things that in Sartar are remote and to be feared, but in the land of 10,000 goddesses, where life is encouraged and unrestricted, it's not unusual to find these nature spirits much more active, much more involved, much more, I won't say friendly, but far more on the Seelie side of the Fae than the unseelie side, which is kind of how we see them in Sartar. So, Evan, what are some key geographical things that we need to make clear to our players and our GMs for if they want to adventure here in Esrolia?
Yeah. Well, so it's sort of an agricultural paradise, but it's not, and highly, as we've said, densely populated. But also there are hidden groves and sacred groves and valleys and caves. These are the places that the 10,000 goddesses live. We're not talking about like that. Ernalda is at the top, but going down, we're talking about sort of the location spirits, the dryads, the naiads, the oreads, the spirits of the hills, the rivers, the groves, and all propitiated and venerated and cared for by the people.
Nice point for your side. Good use of the word propitiated. One thing that I will bring up, there was a book that was mentioned at several of the Chaosium Con panels that Evan highly encouraged me to read. And as I was reading on my own about Esrolia, Gene Wolfe's Soldier of the Mist kept popping into my mind as a story about what it would be like to be in Esrolia. Oh, look over there. There is the god of wine. Oh, look over there. That river spirit. I can see it. I can interact with it. And that is, I don't want to say it's more like high magic, but it is far more mythic. If Sartar, so much of the myths and the encounters are really done through the god time, it feels in some way that because the Esrolians have this lineage and linkage all the way back to the god time, that Orlanth left on the Lightbringer quest, but Ernalda remained. That in some ways in Esrolia, at least to me, your Glorantha will vary, and my Glorantha may be varying wildly off point at this point. But when I've taken my groups to Esrolia, it has always felt as if the apocalypse of time is not as scarring here in this land. That we get glimpses of the paradise that existed before because of the nurturing, renewal, present nature of the 10,000 goddesses.
I think that's right. So more geographically, of course, Esrolia has a substantial coastline onto the Chorlinther Bay, also known as the Mirror Sea, and at present is an enormously important maritime power, not so much in its military sense, but in its mercantile sense. And it's there are people from all over that come through the ports in Esrolia. So to its south is one of its neighbors, a part of the Holy Country, Caladraland, which is a land of volcanic activity, and but they similarly have an earth and fertility orientation, but from the volcanic point of view, Vescarthan is the local name, but we would know this god as Lodril, one of Yelm's brothers, the sky god, the fire sky god who came and mingled with the earth. To the north is an enormous, one of the great Aldriami forests, the Arstola forest, and the Skyreach Mountains. These are barriers in many ways to the north, but there are friendly relations with the elves. To the west are lands occupied by violent male-dominated Orlanthi tribes. And let's remember, the baseline culture underlying Esrolia is an Orlanthe culture, but it's one where the balance between Ernalda and Orlanth is radically shifted. Orlanth is but one. He is the most important, but he is but one of the husband protectors. And on the other hand, the Ditali and the Solanthe are raiders. They have not, settled down. They didn't have a Sartar who taught them to build cities and to be involved in trade. They have the Lightbringers and everything, but they lean very hard into the violence option, and they are dangerous raiders. And to the east is the Shadow Plateau, once the domain of the only Old Ones. Still, the Shadowlands is populated by trolls and darkness worshippers. There is an old friendly relationship with them.
So I love Belantar. I love Belantar. I love this, like the story of Belantar captured my imagination. The fact that the tournament of luck and death, but the one thing that sticks in my craw, the one shadow for me on Belantar's story, and I think this is good storytelling. Don't get me wrong, is the fact that he killed Eskin Gecko. Like, he killed the only Old One, which is also just an amazing title. I love. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Well, there could be only one, and Eskin Keiko, in a different way, was the master of this larger geographic area, Kythela, and that Esrolia is part of. And Belantar came and had, a new take, and there could only be, both were semi-divine heroes. Only one could be the master of the land.
And they fought on the Shadow Plateau, which is a very high land. So
yeah. So because the Esrolians transferred their allegiance to Belantar, because he was the biggest and the strongest ultimately, and Eskin Keiko was killed in his capital, the castle of black glass, shattered. There is a more complicated relationship, although Belantar did win the trolls over. The Shadowlands were one of the sixth of the Holy Country, and part of his master plan to bring the God realm closer to Earth. That's why it was called the Holy Country.
Yeah.
Next over is Hjortland, which is the sort of the primal land still claimed by people who have allegiance to the old Vinkatling ways. The leading tribe is the Hindriki. And they are exceptionally distrusted through most of Esrolian history. There's good reason for that. There are invasions and fights between. The grandmothers are afraid that the Vinkatlings will come back, and that somehow an heir to Vinkat will be produced out of Hjortland, and that he will bring back essentially the apocalypse.
Right.
Things got really bad when the Vinkatlings got left on their own by Orlanth, and they fought amongst each other. They devastated the land, and then chaos showed up and mopped them up and almost destroyed everything. So the grandmothers of Esrolia are, their long-term plans are make sure that no heir to Vinkat, and the way you would be the heir to Vinkat is that you would have the sword and helm of Vinkat. Make sure that someone like that never shows up. So they have a very complicated relationship with Hjortland. But of course, Belantar integrated these six. So there's another part that's not really adjacent, but it's across the bay. It's called God Forgot. It is a godless land of Brethini sorcerers, and it is a strange little western territory that's not in the west, that was settled by long ago by those who follow the ways of the West, of logic, of engagement with, gods are simply a different kind of immortal being, but the Berthini are immortal because they keep their ancient ways.
Right.
So Belantar integrated Caladra land, fire, sky, Esrolia, earth,
Mm-hmm.
the Shadowlands, darkness, Hjortland, air, the islands in the Chorlinther Bay, the Right Arm Islands, water, and then God forgot the void. And in this, he created a sacred balance, a power base, and also a way that sort of made the world different. That's why it was the holy country.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's disintegrating, and Esrolia has to find its own way to forge new relationships with its neighbors that used to be, united by Belantar's wisdom and judgment, and now that's been broken. So, but
Yeah.
geographically, it's this sort of most paradisical, and it's the breadbasket
Mm-hmm.
of of the area, and the wealthiest and most culturally influential part of it.
So when you get into the culture of Esrolia, you really come down to some very interesting, as Evan pointed out, we've got the enfranchised, the client families, the dichotomy between a map for Ganartella, a massively urbanized population, yet a very dense agricultural population. And so you have a lot of these interesting dualisms in Esrolia, tensions that are moving back and forth. When we get to why I think it's a lot of fun to play here, we'll touch on that. But politically, as Evan said, you have this swirling mass of the consensus of the enfranchised family. And in order to get things done, they have created alliances. I won't go as far to say that they are hard and fast. They're not like, well, I'm a member of the Colmar tribe, and that is who I am. These alliances shift; they move back and forth. Um, the image that I have in mind is like roiling sand, and how you'll get like different packets or pockets moving together, but every time they brush up against each other, grains from one are transferred into the other. And so that's kind of how I see this. So if you want an area that has a lot more, I don't want to say a modern view of politics, but a much more intrigue based. Right, in Sartar, if I don't like the way Evan's running the tribe, I just challenge him to a duel, and we knock each other around a bit. Here, that is not the way. This is closed doors intrigue. This is, as Evan said, at its most devious and dangerous, poison and assassins. So if you like that sort of political intrigue game, much like we said, Pavis and the Big Rubble is a city that's a world, and you would never need to leave Pavis and Big Rubble. You could set a whole multi-generational RuneQuest game just there. Notchit is the same way, and I'm really looking forward to what I'm going to call the near future uh, release of Notchit. Right, the when will then be now? Soon, sort of a time frame. So there are three major alliances that are kind of part of this swirling morass of the consensus within Esrolia. And again, what's interesting is this feels like a very feminine way of handling things. Like you said, like a divine feminine. In Orlanth, in Sartar, we see two tribal leaders butt heads, and whoever skull cracks first sort of loses. But in here we see the commingling, the enjoining, the defense of the center, the bringing in, the encircling nature of sort of the divine feminine here in Esrolia. And so the main alliances are, Evan has done a lot of research, and I'm just going to poach all of this because when I was reading through the notes this morning, these fascinate me. So you have the Old Earth Alliance, which again, just the titles in Esrolia. I have Richard from the Grand Campaign. One of his problems, if you will, with uh, Glorantha is sometimes the naming conventions don't live up to his expectations as a linguist. Now there are things that definitely do, but there are some flies in the ointment for him. When you get into Esrolia, I feel like a lot of that falls away because you get these very rich, descriptive, pragmatic um, descriptions. So the Old Earth Alliance, this is your traditionalist group. These are the Esrolian clans and cults that are opposed to the current queen, who is, uh, I'm gonna say in bed with, which may not be just a political metaphor, with the Lunars. They are currently they have a tenuous grasp on being the controlling faction, the ruling faction of Esrolia. Then you have, no surprise here, the Red Earth Alliance, which are supporters of the former queen, who is allied with Fazur Wide Red, who, by the way, is, Evan, we should just do a whole episode on Fazur. He is another one of those fascinatingly complex and very deep characters of in Glorantha lore. He's, even though he's a lunar and I hate him and everything he stands for, I'm compelled by his. I mean, I wore my lunar representation shirt today.
There you
go. So this power faction, even though they've been overthrown, retains power and connections, but they are sort of, if the old Earth is sort of on this side of the wheel, holding on for dear life, the Red Earth is just now on this side of the wheel. And then you have the Warm Earth Alliance. And I don't want to steal all of your thunder and your research, Evan. So why don't you dig into the Warm Earth Alliance for us?
Okay, sure. So, and all of this is a little new, right on the cusp, as in the present timeline, things have just been shifting around. So the Warm Earth Alliance is sort of the spoiler. And all of these alliances are somewhat coalesced around personalities, or at least probably family factions. So there's a secondary city. Natchet is the greatest city. Regos is another very important city, and it is ruled by someone who has been given the sobriquet, the demi-verge, which is apparently a French word that means the half virgin. So
not to be confused with the demi-urge.
Yeah, no.
This is the demi-verge.
It seems, yeah. So the patron goddess of Regos is an ascetic virginal goddess. Her high priestess is ritually virginal, but practically not. The exact opposite. Is a sensualist in every way, and so this sort of contradictory nature. But she is a master of developing alliances. She has won a group of warlords to her side, and she knows she doesn't rule Natchet. She knows that she doesn't have the quite the pedigree of the present queen of Natchet, who is the leader of the Old Earth Alliance, and thus likely the most important priestess of Ernalda in Esrolia. And she doesn't have the power and the connections of the former leader of Esrolia, who was the queen of Natchet before being overthrown by her niece. But she knows that she can play enough of her power to increase her prestige and authority. She comes in at the Battle of Pennell Ford with her forces on the side, and Argrath, many of you have made characters, and your characters may have in the life path been at the Battle of Pennell Ford? Well, the Warm Earth Alliance entered onto the side that opposed the Lunars and the Red Earth Alliance, and they ended up on the winning side. Good play, but now, now everything is sort of up for grabs. A year or two later, Herrick is off doing his thing. Argrath is off doing his thing, and now the game continues, and the three different alliances are still vying for power. The Red Earth Alliance would still like to, they hope that the Lunars will crush the Sardarite rebellion and continue to support them. The Old Earth Alliance has to be in favor of the freedom of Sartar and the freedom of the other parts of the Holy Country, including Hjortland, but they have to be worried about the fears of the Venkatlings and the sort of primal concerns, which the Red Earth Alliance plays up. They're like, the bad king is coming back. The evil king will destroy our way of life. The Lunars, they understand the feminine. They have a great goddess. They will support us. And then there's the Worm Earth Alliance, which is really much more of the personal project of the Demiurge of Regos, who would like to be just a lot more important, a lot more influential, a lot richer, and maybe have a lot more lovers.
Right. It's sort of the sensual opportunist party, if you will. That's
right. And they're like, well, whatever is in my interest is where the Warm Earth Alliance may go. Now, how well can they hold the Warm Earth Alliance together? But as long as they're winning, as long as their leader is picking the winning side, and acquiring more prestige, more wealth, more opportunity, that's going to hold together. And so, both the other alliances have to figure out, what can we do to win this individual over, because, the balance of power will be shifted through this. So it's fascinating and really cutthroat politics.
It really is. And now I want bumper stickers that say, like, the Warm Earth Party, Sensual Opportunists 2024. So we've got about, this episode may be a tad longer because there's 10,000 goddesses to talk about. Evan's going to read through the list of 10,000 goddesses, and I will be back in about a half hour. No, so the main goddess here, as Evan said, is Ernalda, the Earth Queen. It is a Earth-dominated culture and group and, excuse me, and kingdom. But we have all of the other major Earth goddesses are venerated as well. Esrolia, Ty-Kora Tech, the Queen of the Dead, who I love. Esrola, Marin Gore, Babista Gore, Amarja the Savior, who is she almost fits in she's almost the word just fled. I have semantic disconnect. Analogous, thank you. It's that semantic disconnect where it's like the word doesn't sound like it's supposed to. To Sartar, where Sartar created the virtues and what it meant to be a Sartarite. Amarja created the Esrolian virtues of harmony, filial piety, prudence, and compassion. Maybe not created, but instilled them into the Esrolians.
Yes. But from the god time.
Yes. Yeah. So not just Third Age, all the way back. Again, this is why I have a very Egyptian feel to this, because Egypt had that unbroken, if you will, history all the way back to the Old Kingdom and beyond. Whereas Greece goes through several mini apocalypses. The Mesopotamian cultures rise and fall and rise and fall and rise and fall. But Egypt has this continuous line all the way back to their god time, much like the Esrolians. Now we also get all of the husband protectors, wherein the other cultures we've started, these guys are the top of the head of the pantheon. In Esrolia, they are acknowledged as protectors, but they are subordinate to Ernalda because, again, as Evan pointed out, because of this long connection, they all went and did things. So it is very much the divine masculine and the divine feminine, right? The divine feminine holds the center, defends the center, whereas the divine masculine goes out and pushes back chaos and engages in wars away from the center and then returns. But in the god time, those quests seemingly led to their death. Orlanth descends into the underworld. Stormbull is cast down again and again by the devil. But these are in Argan Agar, the troll god. Yamalia, who loses part of what it means to be light. All of these people, Flamal, who dies and then, is reborn. All of these people left while Ernalda remained. And that's kind of the key underlying identity to the entire structure of this pantheon. So, let's jump into why is it here? What is the joy of this happening? Why would we set a game here? And what are the opportunities for play in Esrolia? So, Evan covered them all wonderfully. We're just going to do a recap here. So again, the two main Orlanthi virtues that are tied up together in the two, I won't say catchphrases, but the two repeated mantras of Orlanthi people are violence is always an option. There's always another way. And if, as Evan pointed out, there are Orlanthi tribes where violence is always the option. And in a lot of ways, we see that in Sartar. We see that in Tarsh. We see that in Prax. It's a very violent-focused cultures. Esrolia is, let's take, there's always another way. And as Evan put in the notes, give it a bunch of steroids and make that our first and primary virtue. So if you want to play in a land that feels, I almost said violently, radically different from Sartar, Tarsh, and Prax, Esrolia from the ground up is built on different virtues and built on different focuses and values. They also have a much more positive relationship, as I mentioned earlier, whereas trolls and elves are kind of on the outskirts of the Sartarite mindset, and they are very much the Fae or the other. In Esrolia, the elves and the trolls have been folded into the fabric of the kingdom, right? Very much, do we go out and fight the trolls and the elves at our border, or do we protect that which is enveloped in our borders? We have that duality between urban and agricultural or rural. That's the word I was looking for. We have these tensions back and forth, and yet they all kind of are enveloped under this land of Esrolia. Evan, I'm going to turn it over to you for a little bit. What are some other key significant points that should draw a GM's eye or a player's eye to either setting a game in Esrolia or wanting to play a character that comes out of Esrolia?
Yeah. Well, of course, even with Belantar gone, because of the structure of Esrolia, Esrolia is a sacred landscape everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So three key places in Esrolia are Ezel, the great Earth Temple city,
Mm-hmm.
which is the birthplace of Ernalda. It is a place where you go to worship 10,000 goddesses all at one place. It is along a sacred road. Along that sacred road is also the necropolis, where the honored dead of Esrolia are interred, and where annually there is a procession of the dead. There is a day of the
Mm-hmm.
dead, but the dead actually walk from the necropolis to Notchet, and the people celebrate with their ancestors, with their dead family members. And so um, uh, the, this structure of the landscape is shows how close the realm of the spirits, the realm of the gods, remains to the landscape. And then, of course, there's Notchet, which is this interface with the entire world that has uh, uh, existed since the god time. You can go down and down into the under cellars and tombs and catacombs beneath the temples, and there are places where the gods walked, where the heroes touched and left things.
Mm-hmm.
And so this profound sort of sacred landscape where every grove has its goddess, where every brook is protected by a spirit, is just very vibrant. And then on the other hand, I'd say that because of the sort of imbalance, not it's just a different sorting out because of the
Mm-hmm.
mythology in this area. The There is sometimes a need for the violent reaction. The things that you can't talk to. Esrolia has been invaded over and over and over, and they do have a military tradition. The husband protectors do have that, and yet they've always had difficulty because they want to suppress. They don't want men getting the idea that because they are good at violence, that they will somehow be good at ruling or politics, because
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows that's not true. Um, and and so they channel the sort of martial metal of their own family members, of their own clients, to control it. So sometimes when they need to get things done, they've got to buy mercenaries.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe these are unconnected people who are from Esrolia, who've lost their families, or maybe they're foreigners, but they are very involved with that. And so that now, in a violent time, as the hero wars are coming on, the relationship between some sort of community, whether it's a city, a town, a family, a noble family, etc., and the people that they need to do some violence, is going to be an interesting, fraught, um, intrigue laden, but also very exciting kind of lens onto Esrolia. They have a lot to offer. They're rich.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but that breeds envy and danger for them, and so sometimes they need some people to protect them or to eliminate dangers or rivals.
Yeah. So, just going through this, I came up with about a dozen different campaigns I want to set in Esrolia now, and I have this wonderful distilled Esrolian document, which, if you are a member of the Iconic Patronage, you get access to. So, if you are not a member of the Iconic Patronage and you would like to see the Exploring Glorantha source book that is ever growing, jump over to patreon.com slash iconic production. Join the discussions that we have on the Iconic Production Discord channel. It is a great time, much fun to be had by all. But so here are the things that kind of stand out to me on why, as a GM, I would want to play in Esrolia. The urban intrigue is a side of gaming that I love, and this is the hotbed of it. It's really, for me, Notchet or Glamour would be the two main places that I would set a intrigue game at. You also have the fact that I think there could be a lot of fun to run a a game revolving around playing members of an enfranchised family who discover the heir of Vingad. Do you stop it? Do you aid it? Do you work with the matriarchs? Do you kind of try and take care of this on your own? There would be a lot of interesting intrigue as well as some more classical kind of um, fantasy RPG tropes of going to recover the panoply of Vingad. There's also this idea that for me, and I'll let Evan speak more to this, chaos, I always view chaos as having four facets: violence, disease, change, and wait, no, that's a different game system. But anyway, right, there is a seductive nature to chaos. There's the violent and disgusting side of chaos, but there's also a subtle and seductive side of chaos. And I feel like there would be a very most of the chaos cults are kind of secretive in Esrolia because there's so much divine presence, there's so much awareness of society that comes from that mother's eye, that the chaos cults have to kind of be a little bit more secretive, a little bit more subversive, a little bit more chthonic, if you will. And I could see several gods come to mind and goddesses come to mind of latching on to maybe some inherent bitterness or desire to prove that you could rule for the male factions and the males in Esrolian society, that could provide a bit of the bitterness that would allow a flower of chaos to bloom within the cities. So, Evan, what are some other GM reasons? And then let's talk about playing a character from Esrolia, and that'll kind of wrap our things up.
Yeah. Well, I love everything that you said, and I mean, one of the things that on the other side, of course, it's always very attractive to come in at the level of the rulers and the enfranchised families, those who trade, the ability to be the queens of cities, etc. But there's a whole other level, the downstairs folk, and how do they get power? I mean, on the one hand, they replicate the structure. The grandmother is the leader of the family, but what if you don't have the power and linked to the temples and everything? How nonetheless do you survive? So the matriarchal crime family in a city would be fascinating. And the way to channel those young men is they become the thieves, the collectors, occasional assassins. The play the underworld. You could do it in Natchet, you could do it in Regos, you could do it in any number of the great Esrolian cities, and sort of replicate. How does if you keep it all in the family, of course the grandmother has absolute authority. If you have to come between, but if it have to work out with several crime families, then you have to solve everything by consensus, and all of that could be very interesting. The 5 families of Natchet.
It also reminds me of in It Gets Worse, the old 5e show we had on the Iconic Production channel. Grace's character, where she had the
Right.
halfling.
Yeah. Awesome. And then of course they can encounter chaos because hey, they may be criminals, but they ain't no chaos worshippers. But they might encounter Thanatari, Karshtites, or ogres,
Yeah.
Cacodemon worshippers, because they are the ultimate who blend in.
Right.
They are the chaos dangers hiding in plain sight. They eat their enemies in secret. So I would see a lot of potential in a
I
game
could,
like that.
yeah, and I could also see it from the other side. Starting off a game where the matriarch has been killed and the players are tasked with finding out who killed them and why,
Yeah.
and just have a mystery ball that just slowly unravels as the players start pulling, and you
Yeah.
discover that the matriarch was into some things that she shouldn't have been, and then maybe there are, yeah, like you could do a very interesting, almost notch it noir kind of detective story with magic.
In the old RuneQuest companion, there was a mystery story with a Lankhor detective in the protagonist role, a wonderful little short story, and there was a great suggestion that came out of a discussion in the God Learners podcast in the Blood, Sex, and Rock and Roll Earth Priestess episode 16, I believe,
Yeah, number 16.
um, talking about a character, the Earth Avenger, Babeester Gore. The Axe Maidens are to exact vengeance for wrongs done against the Earth. The death of a grandmother would be a terrible wrong, but rather than just being, the berserker axe killer, they had a character who was a detective.
Mm-hmm.
The way to avenge things is to find out the truth and then punish the guilty. You could have, the detective, Babeester Gore, and that would fit right in with your scenario.
Yeah, that would be awesome. As a player, there's a lot to love about being from Esrolia. One, you get to play the outsider, a completely different view of Orlanthi culture, especially if you're playing an Esrolian in Sartar. You have access to many more of the healing and the earth spells. Now, here's the thing. Just because we're talking about maternal and matriarchal and uh, you've got to remember that one of the key aspects of the divine feminine is protective, is violent protection when needed, right? The joke, the adage of a mama bear protecting her cubs is very much alive and present within all of the divine feminine cults in Esrolian culture. Spells like earthquake, spells like resurrection, these spells which sort of exist on the fringes of Orlanthi cults are at the core of the Esrolian cults. So there's a lot of interesting social dynamics that you can also bring in if you are playing an Esrolian who is in a Sartar campaign, because you are used to, if you're a male character from Esrolia, you are used to deferring to all of the females in your group. Whereas if you're a woman from Esrolia, you're used to all of the males in your group deferring to you, and that can provide some interesting inter-party tension. And as Evan brought up, if you want to go toe to toe with the Orlanthi Rex or Orlanthi Victorious cult members or the Stormbolt cult members, there are some truly violent and terrifying feminine cults. Again, they all more revolve around the protective nature of Earth. But Babeester Gore, the Axe Maidens of Babeester Gore are a terrifying character to play or to encounter within the game. Evan, if you were to play someone from Esrolia, what would kind of be the core of what attracts you to Esrolian as a player in Glorantha? Oh, also, sorry, before I do that, if you're playing in 13th Age Glorantha, the Earth Priestess is a fascinatingly complex and rewarding class. It hums really well, but it is one of what I would consider one of the more advanced classes in 13th Age Glorantha. There's a lot of moving pieces with favors and spells and summons and moving all of these pieces around the board. But if you enjoy a class that requires some forethought and very strategic, not tactical, strategic views of the battle, I would highly recommend playing an Esrolian Earth Priestess. All right, Evan, sorry.
Yeah.
Had to get my last thought out.
Well, if I was going to really go into someone from the Earth pantheon, I think that something that's been a little underexplored, and of course, this is a goddess very important in Old Tarsh as well. But the Marangor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think I'd try to build, someone that it is. Marangor is the destroyer. It's the Earth goddess you want to propitiate. But if you really need to, destroy something, you want to point her, and she's tied to dinosaurs. So someone pointed at becoming a Marangor Earth priestess, with maybe a dinosaur familiar of some sort, Velociraptor, that's small, or Utah raptor, very big and dangerous and scary, and channeling those powers of the earth on the behalf of the family, the queen, ultimately at the enemies, whether they're chaos enemies. What Earth Alliance do I end up with? Well, maybe who has the best offer. Although I think the traditionalists, the old Earth Alliance is ascendant and looking to get ties with Argrath and pitching their star perhaps to that to survive the hero wars. But there's a lot that's going to be going on, and so I think that would be very interesting. She has some elements of sort of the real world deity Kali,
Mm-hmm.
certainly portrayed that way in some of the art, and I think that would be an exciting, sort of terrifying, intimidating character to be able to play.
All right, well, that brings us to a close of another episode of Exploring Glorantha. In November, we will be wrapping up sort of our temporal look at Dragon Pass by looking at the Grayslands. We will be doing a lunar episode, but we'll push that off until 2023 because November will be our last episode of Exploring Glorantha for 2022. This has been a lot of fun. Evan, as always, thank you for your insight and your research, and just I enjoy just coming on and chatting with you about this setting that we both love so much. Now, before I forget, I won't forget because I have a note here. We have a winner of our Rubble Redux PDF package, and that will be if you can get in contact with us. We're going to reach out to you. The winner is the person who put the comment. I would want to play in Pavis and Big Rubble with all my Twitter RQ peeps. We'll probably have to hire out some Mycenaean ruins for some kind of gigantic LARP event, pay some folk to dress up as us, Karsh kids, etc. So it was also my favorite or my favorite handle of anyone who submitted this. We rolled randomly for this. So Peter Pete Re Pumpkin Eater, you are the winner of this first Exploring Glorantha giveaway. Congratulations! We are so glad that you have tuned in and you have listened to the show and have commented on it. So we're going to do another one of these next year. We're going to continue to try and do giveaways, engage with our fans and our community. For those of you who follow Iconic Production, we're making a big push to get to 1,000 subscribers. We are closing in on 700 right now. When we get to 1,000, I have a complete Kickstarter set of Fading Suns, the first Fading Suns Kickstarter, all of the books that I'm going to be sending out to one of our YouTube subscribers. So if you are not subscribed over on the Iconic Production YouTube, please jump over there, hit subscribe, win a chance at or get a chance at getting a copy of the Fading Suns core set. So, Evan.
Well, I want to say congratulations to the winner,
Yes.
and I want to say to those who entered, you can still win in that. If you go and pick this up on Drive Through RPG, the Rebel Redux pack, which has a discount over
Mm-hmm.
the individual products from our friends at Legion Games, who very graciously made this one available. You will be a winner because it's a great product.
It really is.
Pavis and Big Rebel, of course, we love Esrolia, but just to harken back, Pavis and Big Rebel, classic, lots of great stuff.
Very close to my heart.
You will be winning if you go and pick this up on Drive-Thru RPG. And thanks very much. We are coming to we are in our amazing third year of exploring Glorantha. I never get tired of delving in deep and having a great conversation with you, JM, and then terrific follow-up from all the fans who post comments on the YouTube videos, who engage over other social media. Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be able to do this and to share this enthusiasm, and we're just looking to make it better and better.
Yeah. So 2023 holds a lot. We're going to try and get Rick Meints back on the show again. Have some other tantalizing interviews hopefully scheduled. We're going to be starting 2023 with our look at the temporal landscape of Glorantha. We're going to look at the god time, the different breakdowns of the god time, and then first, second, and third age. But that's for the future. For now, Evan, as always, thank you so much. This is one of the highlights of my month. I get to hang out with you. We get to chat Glorantha. It's been a blast. Thank you, sir.
Thanks to you.
All right. Well, until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. We will see you in the Grayslands next month. I'm JM. This is my wonderful host, Evan, and we will explore more Glorantha with you next time. Have a good one.